Humanity is faced with many problems, partially created by the generations before, most notably climate change and, depending on the country, extreme debt and inflation. One crisis has been predicted to cripple society going back up to 50 years, which is overpopulation. Overpopulation has been a threat that many have in the past claimed would already have hit us going back multiple decades. But speaking globally, it hasn't. So will it? That depends, as not all countries are even experiencing fast population growth, or any for that matter. For example, Asia and Africa have experienced rapid population growth in the second half of the 20th century, multiplying their total population. Especially in the case of Africa, which before 1900 had a relatively small percentage of the entire world population, going from 8% back then to 16% now. Asia, even though it has a much larger total population, always had around 60% of the total world population. In comparison, Europe and North America have experienced smaller proportional levels of population growth, maintaining around the same percentage. This giant population growth can be equated to better healthcare and economic growth. As a result of the Industrial Revolution and further evolution of medicine, the rate at which infants die massively dropped. This allowed African nations to experience massive population growth, even though their fertility rate didn't even grow. And through even smaller economic growth, families were able to support and better feed themselves, which resulted in even less kids dying in young age. Predictions for future population. Looking at predictions, the world population going of extreme growth will continue the speed it had in the last 70 years, reaching around 15 billion in 2100. In case of medium growth, will reach around 10 billion in 2100, reaching a peak in population around 2080. And finally, in the case of lower growth, the world population will net decline till 2100 by reaching around 8 billion, peaking around 2050. In my opinion, the medium variant is the most likely. If you look at other examples, countries' population growth slows down the more the country gets developed, as in the case of both Europe and East Asia and North America. And considering that Africa and Asian countries are experiencing massive economic growth, it seems likely that the fertility rate will sink. This has already happened to an extent, as most of the less developed regions' fertility rate has begun to lower, but still high enough to cause population growth. But can the Earth even support such a large population? This of course depends more or less on how good you would intend to supply the population. As an example, food wouldn't be a large problem, in contradiction to popular belief, as global food production has since the 1960s outpaced population growth. The biggest problem in regards to food is that of allocation, as the regions produce food aren't the regions that suffer from food shortages. This only gets exaggerated when looking at the fact that most of the countries that experience large amounts of hunger have poor infrastructure, which subsequently makes it harder to transport food into these areas. Of course, the regions that produce the food also have a lack of interest in supplying these countries. Bigger problems arise if you look at other resources, like rare earth metals, which are essential for any modern economy. The current demand for these metals is already larger than many expected. Luckily, the market gap is supposed to triple by the year 2030, with both of the US and Australia and China having posed to ramp up the production of rare earth metals. But this might not help the problem that much, if you consider that many regions don't need these metals and will do in the near future. The biggest problem in regards to population change in especially the West and in first world countries is population decline, leading to a population crash. This comes as a result of two factors depending on the country. For one, in basically every first world country, the fertility rate has dropped below replacement levels since the 70s. And in the case of countries such as Bulgaria, which has had a steep population decline ever since 1991, from around 9 million to 7 million now, migration also led to population decline. But this is also a phenomenon that happens in other Eastern European countries, in which the population would rather live in countries such as Germany, where social support and job opportunities are much larger. The lowering fertility rate in Western countries has been a result of three main factors. Both economically, for women are much more focused on achieving a good career, and this often results in either getting no children or getting few late, Also, thanks to the cost of living drastically rising, many households, both parents need to work, family. This leads to couples not wanting children, and many as well don't want to birth children to a world with this many problems, not wanting to birth them into more problems. Now, how should you counteract this? What Western Europe has done largely is to allow mass migration to their countries to balance out their deficit of working age citizens. This has been more or less successful, as it has been able to keep the population from collapsing, but on the other hand, as a result of bad integration policies, led to the formation of parallel societies. The other way, which is much harder to counteract this population change, is to make your original population bigger or allow them to make more babies. A somewhat successful example of this is the policies of Viktor Orban. How controversial he is, he has managed to raise the fertility rate of Hungary, slowly but still steadily. This has been achieved by giving mothers tax cuts based on the amount of children they have. This has allowed Hungary's fertility rate to raise by multiple points each year. I hope this video gave you a good summary of population changing and overpopulation and how it may threaten us or how the future may look. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.